to the Behind the Drapes podcast. I'm your host, Expo Rich, and we're recording here at the IAEE EXPO EXPO show floor here in Los Angeles. My next guest, Josh Dome. He is Vice President of Growth with CloserStill Media. Thank you for coming today.
Yeah.
Appreciate you being here.
Good to be here.
Yeah. And
Podcast Rich?
Expo Rich.
Expo Rich.
Expo Rich, yeah. Years ago, it was funny. I mean, way back in the day, I had a, you know, when like the size of emails were like so small that you couldn't get anything through.
That's right.
And the only thing that would go through was Gmail at the time when graphics were trying to be like, and I had to do a very fast email that my client would recognize. So I put exporich at gmail.com, and it was funny because then all of a sudden that stuck and that went into my socials and it kind of just stuck. So,
nice.
So
Perfect.
that's what, and it makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
15 years later.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So why I started doing this podcast, and we started to talk about it before we came on, was, I spent my whole career building the thing for the clients. The clients spend their career showcasing a brand, or you're maybe championing your company's brand. And well, I said, I would like to get to know the actual people that are doing the thing.
Yeah.
So that's why we when I get these conversations together, like I want to hear more about you, and so people can learn about the people that are building the events like this.
Yeah.
So with that, I always like to start with my first question is the origin story. And they could say superheroes have an origin story, and as like what's evident is that people that are now in the senior positions of our careers, no one went to school for this. So this wasn't I
think there are some schools.
There are now.
Right?
Yeah. So I work with a couple of universities actually.
That's great.
But back in the day, there was no track. There was no career track for education. So how did you come into this industry? What was your segue into the trade show life?
Yeah. Well, it's long, so I'm going to try to be brief. I sort of fell into it like so many people that we know, and my side of it has always been commercial, strategic, revenue, finding opportunities externally mostly, strategy and markets, and trying to see where we can grow, whether it be on the sponsor, exhibitor, or attendee side.
Yeah.
But really, I started off in sales in 1999 and spent a year and a half selling an event that we had acquired. And in that day, in those times, the magazine we bought with the event was more important. Yeah. And they had not run a rebook or a space selection, but you spend the next X amount of months trying to get your clients back in. And so I spent about a year and a half doing that, and then we put the event on and we made some changes that in hindsight were not good. Right. And it was a total and absolute and complete failure. So that was my first experience in events.
You're like, oh, I'm really great at this, right?
So as I look back, if I look back 25 years, I'm thinking to myself, what a great entry into an industry. It didn't feel that way.
Right.
At the time, walking around the event and explaining to people what we actually did to promote it, etc. But there was nowhere to go but up from there.
Yeah.
Right? Literally.
That's true.
It just in terms of pulling off, good and successful events for clients and for the company I'm working for.
That's funny. I never really thought about it that way. So like, if one of my ops people come on and their first show they work is like super easy, knock it out of the park, that's a hard line to keep going.
Yeah.
So if it's a failure, then you can only go up, right?
That's right. Yeah. So then from there, it was really, I worked for some great people and worked with even greater people, just in terms of colleagues and over the years. And then we were backed by some great people and investors, but also owners and senior execs. And I just got exposed to the level of creativity combined with dedication that you can implement and then see results from. And so it's one of these things for me where, unlike other, I don't even know if you say industries, but we serve industries.
Right.
Unlike other places and sectors to work, this one lets you build to a date, lets you use all sorts of creativity and effort and energy and collaboration internally and externally.
Yep.
And then your clients, your sponsors, your exhibitors, your attendees, it's this virtuous circle. And I hate to be so sort of Pollyanna about it, but it is a virtuous circle where if you do things as best as you can do them, everyone wins. Your sponsors, your exhibitors, your attendees, the company you're working for, everyone wins, including your colleagues, right? So I just had kind of successive positions, from there, and worked for some phenomenal people, and like I said, worked with even more phenomenal people, because it takes a village is a massive understatement. Right.
And you're right, when everyone's winning, all the stakeholders within, like even the supplier side, if the suppliers are doing and they have the opportunity to do great things, and then it makes the experience and the whole event, and there's so many layers to when we're creating an event, and so many touch points that it's like you're talking about the show floor, but then what does that show floor look like? And even the show floor that we're on, it's got different angles and things like that. It's it's a little more pushing people in different directions rather than just boxes and squares and then lines. And the more creative you get, the more immersive that we can do. And then also you have the digital side. You have so many layering.
And then before we get here onto the show floor, it can be 12 months, can be 18 months, can be 36 months of of planning, of planting seeds, of promotion and marketing and engagement and things that you can't justify to the senior people, but they do pay off eventually. And so it's a great space. I left it for a while and just came back recently. And so it's been wonderful to be back.
So the first show, or it was the magazine, it was a media business that had a show. And
in those days, the show was secondary.
Right. It was like they've always been symbiotic. Like every show had a magazine, every magazine had a show, and that was the kind of the origin of a lot of industry. And but at that point, so you were acquired, and then did you stay on with that company?
So we were private equity owned. We grew from there, several fold, and then we became private equity owned again. And that was led by Charlie McCurdy, who was well known in
Legend.
the industry. And he spent a lot of time in the media business prior to that, but I think that was his early time in the events business. And we had phenomenal backing and support from him. And then at that time, Kevin O'Keefe, who was my boss, I had backing from him. And we had a big run, and then sold to UBM in 2010. And that was very interesting because I had 10, 11 years in private equity, and then going into a public, kind of PLC, they're a London, or they were a London-based public company. And then, UBM folding into Informa later, and so on and so forth.
And Charlie just working his way right up that ladder too. I mean, he talking about a guy who really fundamentally understands the, pushing the envelope.
Well, and supporting people. And so luckily for me, it was aligned with, who I am as a person. Is if you can tell that people are really working at it and trying to figure it out, and then add some value to that, add some support to them, that's this business on the front end. And I know there's a little bit of difference when you actually physically set up a show, but really that's business working, whether you're setting up a show physically or whether you're organizing and
problem solving in general. Whether you're doing it really far out or you're doing it on the fly, it's
and problem solving combined with conflict resolution, combined with looking out externally to see what the opportunities are in whatever market you're working in, and then combined with looking internally, right, at people's strengths, team strengths,
for sure.
So I've just been really, frankly blessed to be able to have that journey and then be back on it.
Have you always been on the sales side, or were you doing like full op, or you were like show director? Like how many different hats did you wear over the years?
All of them except for show ops and logistics.
Okay.
So I was never directly your client.
Okay. So the marketing, communication.
That's right.
Sales.
So I started off in sponsor and exhibitor sales, and then from there went to kind of portfolio leadership, and then overall business leadership. So marketing, sales. We did a bunch of acquisitions, but we also did a bunch of organic stuff. What can we add on adjacency-wise? How can we position ourselves in all these different markets that we were in? And how can we position our teams to be successful and do more and keep growing? And so, so my whole side is business, commercial strategy. and I leave kind of the very important work to people who are good at that, which is not me.
So
The
talking more
logistics and
on
operations.
on setting people up for success and things like that.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned a couple of people that were people that you worked under, and so can we talk a little bit more about your mentors and people that inspired you and that pulled you up?
It was really those two and another, Sally Shanklin, rest her soul.
Yeah. I know she.
You know, in really different parts of my life and career, they each played a really, you know, important role for me, and just really demonstrated the things that for me are about business, but are also about life, right? Treating people respectfully, communicating honestly, working to figure out the solutions, working to find the opportunities, and keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And then if you've got a situation or some folks where sometimes people, you know, are not on board and working against a little bit, you've got to address that head on.
Yeah.
So each of them, you know, have different sort of reasons, but the three of them were hugely important, and I'm really grateful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's great that you know, having the opportunity and to take more on and do more things.
Yeah, right. Getting the support for them to say, well, he's doing okay at this. Let's also have him do this. And so it's those three. And then I left the industry for a while, and now I'm working for Yancey at CloserStill, who's working for Gareth, and I've met him several times. And it's a great group, and I'm reunited with, you know, my old friend Mark Temple Smith, who he and I were together actually in the early days with Kevin and Charlie. And CloserStill is a phenomenal group as far as I can see so far. I've actually, I talked with Michael Westcott and Phil Soar back in 2019 before the world changed. Right. Then the world changed, and I looked at an event for them in Northern California, and then everything stopped, and just through an odd set of circumstances, I'm now back. Yeah.
Like once we got you, we keep pulling you back in.
Well, and it's great because when I left in 2018 the industry, and just came back kind of late last year. And what I learned was, again, that creativity. There are other industries and other businesses where it's pretty black and white and everything is a legitimate fight. And difficult. That's not this industry.
No.
You know, it's about finding opportunity and being creative and being dedicated.
Yeah, it's interesting because like some of my, like, call it on paper competitors are actually like my best friends. You know, doing the same thing I do in different regions, and we support each other. And it's like, you know, no matter what, they'll drop everything to come to your aid. And it's you don't find that in any industry, I don't think. I've never seen it.
I mean, I do think there's elements of it, but in general, for me, it's a little bit of that virtuous circle. Where, you know, if you're doing things, for sure the best you can do, but you need the stars to align in one sense, but if you've done everything that you need to do, you've got your sponsors and exhibitors, you've got your visitors, you've got your company, you've got your, you know, logistics people, it works out. It's not to say it's perfect, but it works out.
It'll all work out. That's for sure. And no problem is unsolvable. And that's one thing I learned from the years, you know, where like I've had some of the most disastrous things, you know, take place. One time I was doing a tanning bed show with a client, and you know, it was at the Lowe's Hotel, which is a second floor exhibits and stuff. So you got to go up elevators.
In what city?
Miami Beach.
Okay, yeah.
So prior to that, the client says, "How long is it going to take to get all of these up?" We have about 45 to 50 tanning beds. Just did the math. I said, "Well, how big are they?" He said, "They're on 4x8 pallets."
Yeah.
I said, "Well, there's 2 elevators that are 5x9. They'll fit in. We can run this, that, unload." I said, "You know, in about 4 or 5 hours, we can get all these up there." Well, of the 45, only about 5 fit in the elevator. The rest were oversized pallets that didn't fit.
Oh, wow.
So, as a backup, randomly, I had this big lull, a big extending arm forklift. And there was a roll-up door on the side of the building, and we were putting them up in like that. So, but the idea
and that was probably quicker.
Well, not really, one by one.
Oh, right.
So what it was like originally they wanted to open the show at 5 p.m. with all of the beds running.
Yeah.
But the last bed was going in at 5 p.m. So one problem was we weren't going to have everything in for the show opening.
Yeah.
But the other side of that was the show was actually planned with all of the exhibit booths on one side and all the tanning beds on the other. So we did a drape line and we opened half the show. So it's like, hey, you can still open, you know, and it's like, it was, you know, obviously it got them in, got them wired up. So the next 3 days of the show was fine and operating and stuff. But it was like one of those things where it was like we're going to keep going until we solve this problem. And we came to a solution and the show kept going, you know,
and you probably have a story, you know, for each month of the year or day of the year, whatever it is. And then on the organizing side, I'll call it, right? The marketing, the strategy, the sales and revenue, same thing, right? There's partnerships and there's, you know, paths we go down when we look back in hindsight and say, should have gone this way.
Yeah.
And so that's where the people that I've worked for and that I currently work for are like, put your best foot forward. And what it is, it is. Instead of, you know, there's other scenarios where people are concerned about taking those steps, you know what I mean, and taking ownership.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we, so I know, like you said, you're pretty new on with CloserStill.
Yeah.
You know, things are just now building and, you know, what you're taking responsibility of and stuff. So for 2025, paint that picture of what that looks like for you and what are you most excited about being part of CloserStill and being back in the industry for next year?
Yeah, okay. Well, I think number one, CloserStill is not only acquisitive, but also really focused on organic growth. And I love that, right? Let's look at what we have and let's figure out how to make it happen. Grow it, what's the adjacency, where's the opportunity? So that's one. And then two, you know, we've got some kind of businesses where folks are evolving and products are evolving, and so we've got to figure that out and grow that. So it's just, it's great. I mean, I look forward to it. I'm thrilled. You know, there's probably not that many stories where a person leaves an industry in 5 years and comes back and just gets to look at the opportunity and then get after it. So that's 2025.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Josh. Appreciate this. It was great to get to know you and be able to tell your story. We're happy to have you back in the industry.
Awesome. Thank you, Expo Rich, man. Nice to meet you.